right, guys. So let's flip the switch and start talking about this. Now, going back to what we were talking about before about surveys, this is actually one of those that's pretty consistent across the board as far as people requesting information wrapped around what is Teams phone. And so, hey, thank goodness that's my job. So if you guys don't know me, I'm Donais. Yes, I'm on the organization committee, the vice president of the MN365 group. However, my day job is I'm a Converged Communications CSM. Focusing on Microsoft Teams phone. And really that's what that converged comms piece really means is I dive really deep into Teams phone and allowing my customers to be able to really understand how it could work for them as they're maybe moving from an on-premise PBX or another cloud PBX to be able to then utilize everything within Teams. And as the title is kind of suggesting, everybody, it's about that journey that you already have. You already are utilizing Teams for a lot of different things, right? So chat and collaboration, you may have pre-built apps or custom apps that are built into that. You may be doing chatbots. You may be doing a lot of things with it. Why not take the next step, right? And that's kind of the idea of what Teams phone is all about. Okay, so let me go through the content. Please do me a favor and throw some questions in there. If you have a question, you want to raise your hand and come off mute, please do so. I'd love that. But there's kind of it's meant to be kind of, hey, what does this mean for me type of scenario? So I'm going to talk high level. We're not talking about deployment or any of those pieces, but really get you an idea of what you can do. And I'm going to break this down into two things. I'm going to break it down into voice scenarios and then other things you have to think about when it comes to Teams phone deployment. Okay, so think of it that way. So the first thing is just overview. Let's talk about what Team Phone is and what it can bring to you as an organization. So the first thing you have to understand is there's a couple pieces to the pie when it comes to Teams Phone. Actually, yeah, Randy, that's a great question. My apologies for not defining that. A CSM is a customer success manager. And as a converged communication CSM, I am helping people deploy phones because they already purchased some of that. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about a little bit. What is that you've bought, right? What is it that you already have? Then you can add phone to that. So that customer success manager is really, you got it. Now let me help you use it, if that makes sense. And just double checking. I thought I heard somebody might be off mute. All right. There we go. We've got a couple people off mute. All right, that'll help. No distractions. All right, perfect. So let's talk about this just a little bit. So realistically, you have two pieces to the Teams phone pie that you need, and we're going to talk in more depth about the bottom side of things a little bit more. But realistically, from a think of it from a licensing perspective, what do you need to have happen? And there's parts to the puzzle. The first part is this over here. It's the PBX part, right? So this is the ability to be able to have a dial tone or actually have the Teams calling app in Teams, and then being able to add a phone number is the second part to that, right? And there's a couple of options when it comes to this. So that Teams phone piece on the top, that can come from a license that you already have or you can get. So if you already have an E5 license, okay, so that E5 license has a lot of different pieces to that, that you then already have this thing called the phone standard or phone system standard license. That's embedded into the E5. It's like that catch-all for a lot of the features and capabilities of M365. However, if you're not on E5 and you're on an E3 or another SKU that you then want to add Teams phone to, you can then purchase this thing that is the phone standard, system standard license that you can tack on as an add-on to that particular license. And that gives you, that unlocks within Microsoft 365 and Teams specifically, the ability to be able to add a phone number to that particular user or resource account so that they can use that number to call out, get a call number in, and go from there. So that's that first part here, right? This section here. The second part is you have to get that to the end result, right? To somebody else outside. So that when somebody picks up a call, that dial tone goes out, that phone call goes out, we need that dial tone piece. And you can get that in a couple of different ways. The first one is if you go with Microsoft using the Microsoft Teams call plans, where Microsoft is the telco provider. That telco provider gives you a phone number, and from that, you can even then port numbers in from other carriers, and then Microsoft becomes your carrier when it comes to making that call, that final line or that final step to getting a call with somebody, right, outside of your organization. Other options you have is you have something called Operator Connect, where we utilize partners, telco providers, right? Some of the ones that you may already use and know and also have right now are Operator Connect providers. They then provide the call plan, right? You purchase the call plan from them, certain minutes, certain capabilities, those types of things, and then using Operator Connect, which is a back-end pipeline, then you have those numbers, assign them to users, and then they can call from there. The third option you have is direct routing. And think of this as more that more flexible capability where you have either a physical server or a hosted server that acts as the go-between between that other telco provider and Microsoft Teams. So it has that ability to be able to liaise between the two, right? And we'll talk about each of these a little bit more. That again, you have a telco provider that can provide that capability, whether it be a physical server or session border controller or a hosted border controller that connects to that telco provider. Then they'll be able to provide you that call plan, the minutes, all those pieces, and then they would get that last stretch and get it out to that particular person when you're making a call. So high level, that's what the sections are. Let's talk a little bit about what each of these are and availability. Now, I'll tell you, between the three options that you have, direct routing is more available across the globe than the other three. And part of the reason why is because it's very similar to a lot of the different PBX solutions that are out there. You have a physical server, a virtual server that you bring in your SIP lines, your trunks to be able to get connected, and then you're able to then make those calls and make that connection. But you do have a physical server or a virtual server that you have to manage and maintain. And countries like India and China and Russia, they require those types of setups just because of the internal regulations, right? We have been making some headway from a Microsoft perspective, being able to get things like Operator Connect into India, which is one of those places that has a very highly regulated telco scenario, right, and environment. So keep that in mind. But I want you to notice that, calling plans are available. Operator Connect is available also across the globe as well. And you do have, depending upon the scenario, the ability to mix and match. You don't necessarily have to do all, right? So maybe here in the United States, we found out that Teams calling is going to be a more economical solution for us. Microsoft Teams calling plans, great. But then when we get to Mexico, Operator Connect is probably going to be a better solution because we got a better deal down there, right? Or in India, where we can't even do calling plans and we decide we're going to do a hosted direct routing scenario there, then you can mix and match and get those numbers brought in as needed. All right, just checking. Yeah, so Doug, I think Jill actually found that. Does Microsoft publish all the SKUs for Teams Phone with explanation of each? Yes, that Learn does have a lot of information on there, including how to be able to get those add-ons if you needed. So there's a lot of good information in there as well. So thank you, Jill, for doing that. All right, so talk about, let's actually jump into each of the different plan options that we have for Teams Phone. Let's talk about the calling plans first. So calling plans, as I mentioned, this is a Microsoft calling plan. We do have a couple flavors that you can then choose from, depending upon the scenario that you need to do, whether it be domestic, international, And we do have something that we just recently, as of this last year, released called Pay-as-you-go calling plan. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit here. But from an international side of things, you then have to decide where you're calling out from and to, and different rates will apply. The link that we have here, if you want to click on that, that will give you more detailed as far as what's going on there. But then you do have to have, if Microsoft is going to be your telco provider, you have to have that phone standard license as a part of that user, and then you have to have some kind of a calling plan associated to it. Either it's going to be the domestic or international, or as you just heard before, that pay-as-you-go. And literally the pay-as-you-go is as you use it up, and you may find that, especially with domestic and international, you have a certain amount of minutes associated to it. You may find some users in your organization just don't use it enough for that type of scenario. That's where pay-as-you-go is a really good alternative for those types of scenarios. As an example, so you notice that you do have the domestic and outbound does have a 120-minute plan, just a domestic plan. You can see that there is up to 3,000 minutes for United States, PRCA, and UK. Other markets, it's 1,200 minutes. Understand any of these minutes here, right? That is per user per month, and it's pooled. So let me take 2 seconds to talk about what that really means. From a pool perspective, if I have, say for instance, I have calling plans in the United States and I have calling plans, bucket of calling plans in the UK. Right, those are actually 2 separate licenses, right? So I may have 10 users in the United States and 10 users in the UK. Right, so if I assign those 10 domestic plans for the United States to those 10 users here, that pool of minutes across all 10 users is only for those in the United States. Those in the UK, if I have another 10, same scenario. They're 2 separate buckets. But let's say you'll take a look at the United States bucket. In the United States bucket, those 10 users, you may have 5 of them that do a majority of the call and may go over 3,000 minutes for that particular month. But because it's pooled, that would actually be 3,000 times 10, right? So you'd have more minutes than that to be able to then pull from as a collective pool, okay? So keep that in mind. That also is a separation too, is if I have some that have domestic, and then I have some that have domestic and international, right? Those are 2 separate licenses, and then 2 separate pools within that, okay? So keep that in mind. Again, you really have to kind of figure out exactly where all those users are and how much minutes they're going to end up using, where those plans are going to help out. Okay. Oh yeah, Doug, don't worry. We're going to talk about SIP gateway and analog connections because that's a big deal. Let's first talk about the capabilities around the products that are out there, the Teams phone products side of things too. And Jill, is the country license tied to anything with 80 users, or could I assign a user license to a user in another country? Yeah, Jill, that's a tough one because there is. And I've actually had scenarios where even though United States and you had somebody in India, which that's actually kind of against their regulations to say it's called toll bypass, you're not supposed to do that, that is actually looking at that information in Active Directory where their location is, and it just doesn't work then, just because of the fact that connection. So yeah, there is some of that's happening as well. All right, so going back, one of the things that I mentioned was that pay-as-you-go capability. One of the things that, along with this, you have to also consider is you may have scenarios like toll-free numbers, right, that you may need to bring in. And one of the things that you can do, and this slide actually talks about not just for toll-free numbers, right, or the calling plan side of things, but you do have to have this set up for audio conferencing as well. If you have a toll-free dial-in conferencing, this is called communication credits. And you set up a communication credit to be able to then say, hey, I need to do a win 100 number. And what it does is it actually has a pool that you set aside money associated to it. And then as soon as that say a couple $1,000s that's in that particular account, the communication credit account, then it's like a prepay model. You prepay it, and then it will just come off at the top of that. Okay, but when 800 numbers are associated, need to be associated to the communication credits on there. If you have any overage on any of your pools, right? So your domestic and international, then it would come off of the communication credits to make sure that those are dealt with, and you don't have any issues running out of time or running out of minutes when you're having those conversations. All right, so that is the call plan side of things. Any additional questions? Any comments? Let's see a thumbs up if you're doing call plans right now, if you know your company is utilizing call plans. Got a couple, that's good. All right, and more than likely, if you're a medium-sized or a large organization and you're using call plans, you're probably not just using call plans, you're probably using call plans with something else, right? And I have a couple customers where they decided to go direct routing, but they had a one-off scenario where call plans just made more sense because of the location and not having to spin up a session border controller to be able to get up and running. They chose to, for that one office in that one particular location, to spin up with call plans, and it's very quick and easy. I'll tell you from experience, is once you have those licenses, call plans in place, you assign it to a user, make sure that they have the phone standard license in there or the E5, and I literally can go and grab a number and assign it to it, and within minutes, sometimes an hour, they're already up and running, and they can start using that phone number to make outbound and get inbound calls. So it's pretty quick and easy when it comes to deploying and getting Teams phones from a calling plan perspective. All right, direct routing, which is more, think of this as more the flexible one, but it does, there's some more labor involved with something like this, but it is similar to what a lot of organizations have with legacy PBX scenarios that they've had. So it makes more sense for some organizations to stick with this. So really what you do have ultimately, you still have your PS10 provider, their telco provider, right? That has a voice trunk that's going to be going to your specific locations. Maybe it's by site, headquarters, specific location. What you're going to have is you're going to have that session border controller. And that session border controller is that translator between that telco provider and then being able to connect it into Microsoft Teams. Or you may have other apps that are certified SBC partners that then tie into that. You may have ATAs or devices to be able to help with analogs to be able to connect in. You may have other systems that you need to connect in through that then connect into your session border controller to make that connection. Maybe it's I want to run my legacy and Teams at the same time. This is going to be your best solution first, right? So maybe it's a transition that's going to take a year or so to be able to get moved from, old legacy Cisco, Avaya, Mitel scenario to Teams, and you need this particular scenario to be able to help you with that. So that certified session border controller is going to be that gateway to be able to help with that. And then you have your phone numbers that are connected into that, and then you go to Teams. And so that's that translation or that connector between the telco provider and Teams in Office 365. And I do want to stress it needs to be certified session border controllers. And we do have a few certified vendors that can do this. So we'll talk about that in a second. Really what the certification means, it's going to be a SIP protocol connection. The certified devices are tested to make sure that they are going to work within the Teams service and get connected. We run a lot of different tests to make sure it's certified prior to being out, and then after the fact, we continue on with that. All right. So Ben is also saying, yes, some telcos do direct routing as a service or direct routing, and they manage the SBC for you. Yes, they do. Hosted SBCs is another good way to be able to do it, and that's either you hosting it or Your telco provider will also do that as well. So good point, Ben. Thank you for mentioning that as well. And behind the scenes, they're utilizing certified SBCs, session border controllers, to be able to do that as well. Yes, they can be physical or deployed into the cloud, as it mentions. And for a list of those, in fact, I think I do have the updated list for this. These are the ones that are out there. And we have others that are being certified all the time and getting added to the list. These are the ones that I have a lot of customers that are doing and utilizing these currently. All right. Now, along with that, we bring this up too, is a lot of people or a lot of organizations are concerned about things like survivability. If, for instance, team services goes down, well, what do we do? So with that, we actually do have survivable branch appliance that goes along with direct routing. So if you have a scenario where you have one of those sites that you have to have up and running no matter what, then direct routing is going to be your best solution for doing that. And additionally, there are certain vendors that they can provide the SBC, but then they can provide the SBA piece, the survivable branch appliance piece, for direct routing on top of that. AudioCodes, Oracle, TE Systems, and Ribbon have devices that support the survivable branch appliance side of things. And so with that, though, understand that not all features will be available once it flips over. If, say, for instance, Teams goes out, you still be able to make a phone call. You still be able to do certain things, right? So you can do inbound and outbound calls. You can do VoIP calls, but they're going to be routed as PSTN calls as opposed to a VoIP call. Hold, on hold, mute, DTF, all those things, some of the basic features, right? Supported clients, you'll notice, but some things you're not going to be able to have because the service is down and SBA is not able to then do certain things, right? So advanced features, call forwarding, call queue, merge, those things. Making an emergency call is not supported in offline mode. I will tell you, though, that talking with our internal teams, a lot of the things on the right-hand side, that is being worked on so that it is going to be available as a feature within SBA. They are currently working through those processes right now to get that up and running. But again, when Teams is down, this is that alternative for survivability, availability if something happens. I do want to call out that right now we are set to only do 24-hour outage, right? That is being worked on to be able to extend that to 72 hours in the future. All right, so again, very high level, Teams, phone, direct routing is a good possibility. And again, Ben, thank you for calling out, but having you don't have to have physical servers to do that. In fact, I have a couple customers that are doing DRaaS, or direct routing as a service, through their telco providers to be able to not have to worry about those servers, right? And then they're managed by somebody else, which a lot of companies are getting out of that, trying to manage servers side of things. Along with that, Operator Connect is very similar in that sense that there are no servers for us to be able to manage, but we are utilizing a third-party telco provider to be able to give us those numbers and manage that behind the scenes. So it acts a little bit differently than direct routing. So let's take a look at this just a little bit. This has been out for a couple of years now, and really what happens is that behind the scenes, when you decide you want to go through direct routing, or I should say Operator Connect, basically what you do is you go through Teams Admin Center, you go in there and you say, hey, I want to arbitrarily use one, AT&T as my Operator Connect provider. And so I'll go and choose that from the Teams Admin Center, and then that will let them know, AT&T know that we're interested in doing Operator Connect through them. We sign everything, we get our information kind of set up, and literally they're able to set things up behind the scenes. There's a pipeline between AT&T and Microsoft behind the scenes. Yes, they do have session border controllers back there to be able to do it, but it's really behind the scenes. You can have this up and running within a couple days and start getting phone numbers through Operator Connect. And then the numbers will come through and you will see them within the admin center. Okay. Along with that, we have Operator Connect for phone. We have Operator Connect for audio conferencing. So audio conference bridges, if you know, those are those numbers that you can get for your Teams meetings, right? So you have that conference so that somebody can dial in, as opposed to having always be on Teams. And you may be in a scenario where you cannot, you don't have internet connectivity, but you still have service, right? Phone service to be able to dial in. So that's your opportunity to be able to do that. So Operator Connect is another way you can get audio conferencing capabilities through a telco provider, right? As opposed to using Microsoft as your audio conference bridge. And then the last one in the Operator Connect family, and we'll probably be adding more to this here in the future, is called Teams Phone Mobile. And think of that as like Operator Connect, only we're at the with the mobile device scenario. So we're organizations that deploy Teams, and you have maybe company-owned mobile devices. That means that somebody may have two different phone numbers, right? So you may have the one in Teams, and then you have the one directly on that phone, the mobile device. Where Teams Phone Mobile allows you to have one phone number, right? And it goes across both Teams and natively to that device. So when I mean natively, that is that number is not on the app on the phone, but it is associated with the SIM card on that phone, right? So then when it rings not only on that phone on the native dialer, but it also rings on the desktop, right? Or even if you have a desk phone, you have that capability as well. Right now in the United States, Verizon is the only one that we have. Up in Canada, we have Rogers. We have a couple different telco providers that are doing this around the world. Go to aka.ms/operator connect. That link that you see right down here, right? Go to that, and that will tell you what country that you have the ability to be able to do what with what operator. But this has been out since beginning of, probably mid of last year, and it's a really, really good solution wrapped around for your teams, your salespeople, right? They're always constantly going out there, and the other piece too is then the company owns the number versus that person owning that number and taking it with them if they leave the organization, so that stays within the company. All right, so this is where in Teams Admin Center, you have the ability to be able to look at operators and then choose from there. And you actually can take a look at all options, right? So you can use Operator Connect, you can use Operator Connect for phone, Operator Connect for audio, and then Teams Phone Mobile. You can say what location, right? So what location are you looking at? Then what do you want, right? Do you want to have Teams phone calling? Do you want to have mobile? Do you want to have audio conference? And then you can then whittle down to what you're looking for. And then as soon as you go ahead and click on that particular provider and go through that process, then you'll see the numbers will be populated within Teams in the phone numbers area, so that you then can assign it to somebody that has the appropriate licenses on our side. All right. Any questions on Teams Phone Mobile, on Operator Connect, on anything wrapped around this so far? Let's see. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so perfect. Any integrations with 8x8, RingCentral, other VoIP providers? Unfortunately, like RingCentral actually is a competitor of ours. Mike, I hate to say that. 8x8, same scenario. I think a lot of them are competitors. There are apps that I know that you can then, like RingCentral has an actual Teams app that you can do, and then it kind of takes over as that phone number. So that, as far as integrations, not necessarily. If you're thinking about from a contact center side of things, we do actually have a lot of contact centers that are certified contact centers. wrapped around Teams phone. And when I'm done with this, I'll actually throw the link, or if somebody can find that, there's a good page that actually talks about contact center capabilities and integration. And all the integrations are different depending upon the solution that they deploy. There are some contact centers that literally run out of Teams. It says a Teams app, where other ones are standalones that have integrations from a phone side of things. So just depending upon what you're looking for. And then Jill, does the phone number list include direct routing numbers? So direct routing is interesting because you will not necessarily see those phone numbers in direct routing. You will see them in whatever that telco provider provides you from a portal set of things. And then you can then assign them either PowerShell, or you can assign it through the interface to that particular user, but you're not going to see this is an available direct routing number within that section of Teams Admin Center. All right. Any other questions? Very cool. Okay. So I want to talk just a little bit about some of the other pieces to the pie, some of the things that you need to also consider wrapped around deploying Teams Phone. And somebody was asking about analog devices, other devices that we have connections to. SIP gateway is another one. So we'll talk about that here shortly. But another piece is dynamic E911 emergency calling that you have to consider as part of this deployment. All right, so some considerations wrapped around dynamic emergency calling. One of the things we have to understand is that with whatever solution you choose, some of them come with it, and some of them you actually have to go for and get a third party to be able to help out with the E911 piece, what's going on, right? So if you're doing a calling plan, we include that piece out of the box. If you go with Operator Connect as part of that package that telco provider gives you, it should include emergency calling. The one piece that it does not would be with anybody who's using direct routing. Direct routing, you actually have to go through and have another provider provide you that capability from an E911 perspective, because that's just because of the beast, right? Session border controllers are involved with that. Okay, and just understand that when we're setting up on our end, anything that's emergency calling related, we do have some options that we have the ability to, when somebody calls 911, that you can include a service desk notification so that they can be included on that call, or at least notified when that call is happening. And that could be a group or it could be an individual, right? You can set that up, and you can configure how that experience is for internal security groups to be able to handle it. And that can be done by site location if that is the case. It can be done from a central location depending upon how you have that set up. One thing that's also a lot of organizations, and if you did not hear about the Carey's Law and the Ray Baum's Act, those happened last couple of years ago, they really literally say that you need to be able to provide 911, especially with a service like Teams Phone. We need to provide the ability to have 911 wherever that user happens to be, right? So specifically, if I'm in your company's network, obviously I should be able to then call using Teams Phone, and then be able to let them know what's going on. They have my location information, and then they're able to dispatch police, fire, whatever they need at that point. But this also says if I'm not in the office and I'm using Teams Phone, I still need to be able to relay that information, right? So this capability of being able to dynamically give information, my location information, E911 type scenario, is part of this. And us having to do that through Teams is important. So we actually have some capabilities with that, and we'll kind of talk through that as well. But in general, when you're configuring emergency calling within Teams, there's some things that you need to keep in mind. So first off is you do need to set up things like trusted IPs. What is the boundary of your network? Because that's important, because then if somebody does like go to a coffee shop, one of the things that it needs to know, Teams needs to know, is I'm not in network anymore, right? And so then things change as far as how that location is going to be sent out via 911, if it's inside the network versus not, right? So some things that you can configure inside here, things like the local information service or list, that can be determined by how you have emergency locations and addresses set up within the Teams admin center. Right? So if I'm in a particular building and I have that as an emergency location, great. However, are there certain states where you need to then define, it has to be in a specific floor in that building, right? So you may have that set up as subnets or ports or a particular switch on a particular floor. You may have to go to that level to be able to determine what is that location within that building, right? So that can be built out within the Teams admin center. Then you set up policies based off of the user or / the site, depending upon how you have things set up. And then finally, you may have some specific configurations that really allow you to get hone into that lower level to get that information through to 911. All right, looks like Doug has a question. How does Microsoft process feature requests? Okay, let me hold off of that. Let me get through the emergency information, and then we'll get to that question here, Doug. Direct routing, as I mentioned, is kind of that one that you are not going to be able to use our internal. For all of it, you're going to have to go through a third-party tool or a third-party application to do that. Down below here on the right-hand side, these are our certified 911 providers for direct routing. And they're going to do that translation of a local, right? So I know a couple of companies that have used Bandwidth and Intelliquent that have that capability to be able to say, hey, locally, this is where I happen to be. And then it's going to make that translation and send that information out to the PSAP, which is the public safety answering point that all 911 is based off of them. But keep in mind, if you're going to the direct routing part, you're going to have to add that in as part of your cost in keeping the system up as you're moving forward. For calling plans, it's built in. For Operator Connect, that's part of the deal that you get from that telco provider. Now, as far as that work from home consideration, as I mentioned, that Kerry's Law actually pushed this last one that came out. And it's literally saying that even if you're not in the network, you need to be able to send your location to 911 so they can go to that and then help you. So a couple things along with this. Built into the app, you have this ability. It does actually, for some things to be automatic, it does require things like location services to be enabled. Not every company does that. Otherwise, then what you'll end up being able to do is being able to manually add in your location, but it will pop up and say, hey, I see you're not in a normal location. Can you please, is this the right location? If not, please type that in, right? So you'll notice in this particular slide here, it kind of shows you down here, this is where it's at. If I need to edit or confirm, I will see that, and then I can make that changes as necessary. Also, notice there is a customizable banner that you can then customize within the Teams admin center to be able to say, hey, some organizations have said, hey, by the way, please don't use Teams. If you're away from the office, please don't use Teams to dial 911. Please use your cell phone. Most cell phones then have location services enabled. It'll dispatch to that location easily. Or you can then say, hey, make sure you do this. Make sure you update it so that emergency personnel can be dispatched. That is, again, customizable in Teams Admin Center. You will notice then in Teams settings, right? And this is the classic version. Same thing's going to happen within the new Teams, that you're going to see your emergency location. You can also click on that and then update that as needed. And then you'll see that, hey, if you've configured this within Teams Admin Center to have a service desk or a security desk be included in this, this is the screen information that you will see if you're that service desk. Hey, there's an emergency call in progress. The number, this is your location. That's what's going on from that side of things. You'll also notice this is being updated within a team conversation saying, hey, there's an emergency call being placed. And this is, again, for your service security team that needs to have that information. So Dave from Old Republic says, how does this work with Teams mobile? Would the cell provide the 911 location? Yeah, it does. Because you have many times, obviously, we do have location services enabled on that mobile device. It's going to automatically then pump that information in from a Teams perspective and then go there. Absolutely. Best practice for setting location services on our PC. How would you work through location discovery if they're using? Yeah, Doug, that's anything with Zscaler is always going to be probably a tough conversation. And I'm not sure where we even start with that, because there's a lot of things that would have to be set up on that PC to make it safe. I would suggest if it's in network versus out network, you may want to take a look at that kind of setting. But I don't think we have enough time to go through all of that. All right. So from the end user perspective, you will see this is what's going on. It will literally call out, hey, you have an emergency call in progress, just so you can see from the end user side of things. From if you have the security desk notification and connected or configured, one of the options is that you can then have the security desk conference end and muted versus not muted. And then what they allows them to do is be able to jump into the call and then listen in and then take information. And maybe internally they may have somebody ready to be able to be there if there is a need for that. But this can be configured through Teams Admin Center to be able to set up from emergency calling. And then that's, by the way, that can be set up per policy and then per site, depending upon how you have things set up. All right. Good questions. A lot of information so far. Any other questions? Any other thoughts wrapped around? Oh, I did want to get back to Doug, so give me a second. All right, so Doug had a question. How does Microsoft process feature requests? That's a loaded question, Doug. Only because there's a lot of ways that Microsoft engineering gets feature requests from companies, from organizations, from individuals, right? There's a feedback mechanism. I forget. I'd have to take a look and see if I can find the used to be a user voice, but now it's changed. That way you can actually submit feedback. Another way is going through your Microsoft account team. So if you have meetings, regular meetings with your account team, like I have customers that I work with as a Converged Communication CSM, that I will sit down and have meetings to help them with their deployment, answer questions. And then if they have a suggestion for a feature feedback, what we'll do is then we'll gather that and we'll submit it on their behalf. Now, what they will do, and that's engineering, what they will do is they will take all of these entry points and they will prioritize them. And I will tell you, the more that you can then have other companies, or similar companies like yourself, submit these feedback, the more likely something is going to get then into features, right? So, for instance, one of the things that we know there's from a call queue perspective, and we'll talk about a little bit call queues here and auto attendance here shortly, is from customers is we need more analytics, right? The analytics are good, okay, just we need a lot better, right? And it's got to be easier for me to be able to filter through to a specific call queue, and I want to see what's going on from the agent side of things, who's busy, who's not, that type of thing, right? Almost getting to like a contact center-ish type scenario. Well, I know that there was a swell of requests for better analytics, and as part of that, that group is working on something that's coming out here probably in March or April of this year that will increase or make that information, that analytics better for that, because and it's actually part of a larger package, but basically what it is they took all these features that were being requested by companies, and there was enough groundswell to be able to say, hey, let's go ahead and do that, right? So like I said, it's kind of a loaded question. There's not a straight answer so for that, but that's usually how that process works. I hope that helps out a little bit, Doug. And then Randy, for email and leveraging direct routing, do we get access to both the security team barge features as well as team to receive an email, or does that have to occur from the third-party provider? That is a good question, Randy. I don't remember off the top of my head because I think it's all actually offloaded to that third-party provider because it's all going through the SBC when it comes through that. So I think the answer is it has to go through the SBC, or it has to go through that third-party provider to be able to help you out with those pieces. All right. I hope that answers your questions. Let's move on to what I was kind of hinting about before, auto attendance and call queues. So let's get into a little bit of the features. Besides being able to make a call and receive a call, there's things like delegates that we can then jump into and do from a boss admin side of things. There's some basic features that are in Teams to be able to help hold and call park and those things. But let's talk about something that's a little bit more advanced, the auto attendance and call queues. So think of the auto attendance as the ability to be able to have like a call tree as you're coming into a particular number, dial 1 for Bob, dial 2 for security, dial 3, and so on and so forth. Call queues, for those from, coming from a Cisco world, think of those as a hunt group, right? So it's a group that's going to get that call, and then you can decide how they get that call. Is it all at once? Is it in an order? How do you want that to work? So let's kind of talk about how those two interact and how they work here in a Microsoft Teams. So the auto attendant, again, toll free. You can do local numbers if you want to. Dial by name search directory is built into that. And by the way, you have the ability to be able to scope that search directory. So that doesn't have to be everybody in your organization. You could say, oh, if I have a security group that has XY's, not for this particular site, and this auto attendant happens to be for that particular site, then I can then scope it to that. And I can say, yeah, but don't have the VP be inside that scope, right? So exclude them from that. Custom greetings and menus, some options for, for instance, holiday schedule. If you want to do something a little bit different on a holiday schedule, you can literally set up how it interacts when it comes through. So say, for instance, one of them is you want it to go to a voicemail. Very easily you can do that. You want to be able to type out what you want, or you want to put your own audio code or audio file in there for what you want. You have a professional do that. You can know those speech recognition in 14 different languages, as well as the ability to do things through the portal and PowerShell scripts panelists to be able to handle that. Call queues, as I mentioned, are kind of like that hunt group side of things where you have a coordinated group, people who are going to answer that particular phone call, right? It could be just coming in through Teams, or you can actually do something called voice enabling a Teams channel, where then you have a tab inside that channel where then everybody in that particular channel, or I should say in that particular team, then has the ability to be able to get calls, and you can see in some analytics and some information from there. You then have the ability that a supervisor, right, who owns that Teams can manage that. Some of the things I mentioned too is that we have with that analytics around call queues, we do have coming down the pipeline soon an app that's going to really bring them all together, so we can do things like whisper and monitor and barge and all those pieces that you would have on a lower end call center type app that is coming in the near future. So let's dive into some of these a little bit more. Some prerequisites that you need. You do need to have a resource account. And a resource account, you do have, by default, when you have Teams Phone standard licenses within your organization, either E5 or standalone, you get a certain amount of these resource accounts for free for auto attendants and call queues. And in fact, you have starting off 25, and then for every 10 phones system licenses you have, again, either E5 or standalone, then you have another one resource account that gets it, that you have to be able to use. For each auto attendant and call queue, you have to have a Teams resource account associated to it, or Teams Phone resource account. Okay. And then you have to have a number, phone number, really a phone number to be able to do things. Like if it's a call, if it's a calling plan, they have to have a license associated to that. If it's a direct routing, they have to have a plan assigned to that, or a phone number assigned to that to be able to call out. So depending upon your scenario, how you have that set up, if it's a 1-800 number, you have to have that configured, and then you assign that to the resource account. Yeah, I know, Dave. That is, and there's a post that actually talks about it, or an article that talks about that difference, that 25, first 25 free, and then 1 per 10 type scenario. It's out there. I'll try to find that as well as the other one I was mentioning before. All right, agent prerequisites. They basically have to have that capability for a phone side of things. So they have to have phone standard license to be able to do and get those calls, depending upon if you want them to call out. Can you apply a voice mailbox to a resource account? Yes, you can actually then set up a voice mailbox to that resource account to be able to get them so it goes directly to their voicemail. And in fact, as part of the setup, when you're doing a call queue, you can say, hey, if nobody answers, send it to the voicemail, right? And you can say whatever that voicemail is, but you can then set it up to be able to handle that. So great question, Randy. And so that agent just needs to be enabled for voice, right? And then be able to be a part of that call queue, however you have that set up. And some capabilities, just so you can see this. So off in Teams admin, one of the things when you set up a call queue, you have this ability, as I mentioned, to do what's called a Teams voice enabled channel. In this particular scenario you see here, this is a help desk one. And in here, as you notice, that's actually right here within the Northwind Traders group. Anybody who's a part of this team then would be able to see this and would be enabled as long as they have the licenses to be able to see that. As an agent, so to speak, in here, I can then, if I have a call queue set up, so I can say, hey, toggle me off, I'm away from my desk, or toggle me back in. You could also set this up to go by presence. So say, for instance, I am not available. You then, if I'm not available, then it won't put me into that queue. However, I have that set up. Then as soon as I jump back on and then my presence shows what's going on, then I'll be back into that queue. So you have a couple different ways to be able to handle that, okay? But again, this is voice-enabled channels. If you're not doing voice-enabled channels, then if you go into the Teams setting in the calls, there is a toggle for whatever queue you're in to be able to say, I'm out or I'm in. And then, by the way, that app that I was talking about before is going to condense all that, so it's in one dashboard, basically, so that it's easy to be able to see which groups you're in, what call queues you're in, to be able to toggle in and out as you need to. All right, down to the end here. Any more questions wrapped around auto attendance call queues? I know it's very high level. There's a lot more to it. Maybe later on, maybe another session. If we get enough interest, I can actually walk through how to be able to configure some of those things and what's going on. But there's some really good videos that are out there that actually show how to be able to do that configuration.
IT help desk.
Oh, somebody was on. Try muting.
Hello, it's the IT help desk.
All right. Let's talk about some device considerations, and this is pretty quick. We have just a couple slides on this. So when you're doing Teams phone, you do have to kind of consider, and I have a lot of customers that are not just doing a Teams phone deployment, but they may be also doing a Teams room deployment. They may be refreshing their desktop phones. They may be refreshing a lot of those. So you have to kind of consider specifically how you're doing things, right? So I will tell you that probably about 25% of my organizations that I'm working with, they're not doing any desk phones. They're doing everything soft phone. They're using that from the team set of things to be able to just answer the calls and make those calls. Maybe it's a headset, maybe it's a speaker. You have to kind of decide from a personal device set of things how that works. That could mean, depending upon their role, they need a desk phone, right? So they need that phone sitting right there, and maybe they have speed dials. They have a lot of speed dials, so they'll have to do something like a sidecar to be able to have more speed dials, so they can just push a button and then send it to that particular person, or just quickly help them from their role to be able to access. So that's something you have to think about from a persona perspective and a role perspective. On the other side of you also sometimes have shared devices that are going to also use phone numbers, right? So you may have conference phones. You may have Teams rooms that need to be able to call out to, maybe it's a phone number because they don't have necessarily Teams, Zoom, or WebEx capabilities, but that's a phone number they'll be able to connect. So there's a lot that goes along with that from a consideration from a device side of things. The other piece too is you may have legacy devices that are SIP devices that may not be native Teams devices, right? So you have investment into Cisco devices or Poly devices that you still want to be able to get your bang for your buck, right? So we do have this service within Teams that's called a SIP gateway, and what it does is, and again, there is some certification for these devices that has to go through, but there's a lot of devices that have gone through this certification. An example you see, there's a lot here from different vendors, from different SIP devices that can go through and then allow you to be able to still connect in. So for instance, I still want to be able to do inbound, outbound calls. Great. If I want to do a transfer, I can do that. Dial in for a meeting, I can do that, right? Set do not disturb, voicemail, call forwarding, right? 911. If there's still those pieces that you need and do not need a Teams native device and you have these devices, I would highly suggest checking that out because it's actually a little bit then cost effective to be able to use those devices. That link here, Plan for SIP Gateway, actually shows you an updated list, by the way, of all those devices that are SIP compatible, so that you can continue and do things from there. The other piece too that I haven't really talked about much is if it's not SIP compatible and it's an analog device, right? So you may have analog devices that are, maybe it's a door, right? A security door that you need to have an intercom. Maybe it's a PA system, maybe an overhead, right? That has those capabilities or needs that capabilities. Maybe it's even an emergency call box in an elevator. We do have partners. For instance, actually last month, we actually had certified some more adapters, right, ATAs that allow us to be able to then connect those analog devices to Teams, right, through SIP Gateway, through directly into that direct routing capability. So Cisco, Poly, and Audio Codes just came out with ATAs to be able to help out with those scenarios. And we have a partner called Algo Solutions that have the ability to be able to do things for PAs and emergency strobes, those types of things to be able to help on plant floors, those types of things. So all in all, we do have a lot of capabilities wrapped around Teams Phone to be able to help you guys move from legacy systems into Teams as your provider, your telco provider. So taking a look at here, if there's time, can you provide any details on analogs? For example, fax machines. Number one, Randy, fax machines, not going to touch it. You're going to have to go through another solution to be able to help out with fax machines. Overheads, I kind of mentioned that. Analog conferencing systems, that's where the ATAs are going to come into play and help out with. We have a lot of different solutions around that. But again, it's going to be partners that are going to be providing those capabilities. And then how that gets integrated, that's where partners are really going to help out with those to be able to get those devices connected in there. All right, then Sherry put in there, if you're telecom focused organization, CommsV Next, yep. The CommsV Next is a great conference that talks about a lot of these across all of them. It's just not Teams, it's also across all the different providers that are out there. And then Victor, for front desk, reception desk is a solution for shared contacts. Shared contacts, that's a good question. I know there was a solution out there to be able to script creating those types of things, but not necessarily an easy shared contact type scenario, Victor, that I could come up with. But let me see, let me take a note down to be able to see if I can find that script and throw it in here while Sherry is going to talk about planner and to do. Let me say shared contact script. All right. Ryan, we don't leverage Teams for phone, but we use Algo with our current SIP provider and have been very happy. Yeah, I agree. I think they do a really good job overall, and I'm happy that they actually started going down the whole Teams route and incorporate that in there as well. So thanks for the recommendation, Ryan. Mike, any considerations for healthcare clinical communication and collaboration with EHR, Epic, those types of things? I don't remember off the top of my head if there is any type of a connection from a phone side of things into those. I don't spend a lot of time on the healthcare side of things, but I do have some colleagues that kind of work in that space. Let me see if I can ping one behind the scenes while Sherry's talking a little bit and see if I can get more information for you on something like that. So, all right, Mike. And then if we have a fax machine on audio codes device, it will not work. So basically, yes, Randy, it will not work. You're going to have to go to an eFax type solution, cloud fax type thing to be able to handle it. We just do not support fax machines through Teams phone. So through the Teams service. All right. Wow. That's all I have for information. Any other questions that you guys may have? Yeah, Dave, put a fax machine in the dumpster. I know, just not capable around all scenarios, but that would be my thought too, Dave. All right, final call. Any other questions? Otherwise, Sherry, if you want to come on camera. Yeah, I agree, Mike. Healthcare fax pagers, buildings are always under construction. Yeah, I would agree. Not much we can do about that.
All right.
I hear you, Sherry.
Am I here?